It's not always about being in that startup lifestyle. If it is for you, then that's where you'll always be. Every business that I've seen go from startup through fast growth to maturity, someone who bled for the business with their co-founders always leaves.
So Tim, like all these anecdotes, all your experience, all your, failures and learnings from that, there's a lot of advice for startup founders out there. Can you give us your top 10 of those advices? Not necessarily in what's most important, but like the top 10 things that you say like these are things that you at least need to be mindful of if you're a founder in an emerging tech industry that has high velocity, like blockchain, like AI.
I've been very lucky to have been around a lot of entrepreneurs who've been successful, much more so than I have. And I've learnt my own lessons, but it's always helpful to learn other people's lessons, so you don't have to learn your own. Learn from someone else's mistakes. So first thing first, I would say try and stay healthy and fit. Healthy body, healthy mind, agile, lean, all of the things that should be applying to your business should apply to you as well if you can. It's so much easier for long haul flights, for getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning for that conference call with an investor in a different time zone, etc. And you'll sleep better, and the sleep that you can get doesn't need to be quite so long and lazy and what have you. A boss used to say to me that if he needed something done quickly, give it to someone who's really, really busy. And the rationale behind that, which I think was very true, was if someone's spinning fast, then they've got more capacity because they're spinning fast, not because they've got capacity. Someone who's sitting over in the corner of the office not doing very much doesn't necessarily have capacity. They might be where everything goes to stop. So I think about that too. Think about yourself being that person. Make a decision. Either burn your boats or keep a life raft. There are arguments for both. There are metaphors for both. There are historical stories that support both. I'm not going to go on about Vikings and Helen of Troy, but just make your choice and be very, very clear as to which it is. If you go halfway between the two, then that's when we start to feel flabby in terms of our commitment to our corporate mission, I suppose. Thirdly, I'd say it's not necessarily about the startup lifestyle. The startup lifestyle can be exciting. It can be cool. It can be bonding with your co-founders. But you need to aspire to have something beyond that. Otherwise, you'll always be sofa surfing. You'll always be going to the coffee shop to do your work in the day. It's not always about being in that startup lifestyle. If it is for you, then that's where you'll always be, I'd suggest. Keep on top of finances, in particular, both personal and professional. Gets one of the worries off, or it means that you can address something that is a major worry. You'll identify earlier if something is a red flashing light rather than hiding it and it becoming overwhelming when it's too late to be able to do something about it. If you have co-founders, you're a group of co-founders, document your agreements. One of you will inevitably leave the team at some point. Every business that I've seen go from startup through fast growth to maturity, someone who had bled for the business with their co-founders always leaves. It's just the law of averages. It's not a bad thing. It's a natural evolution of humans and also a business. That inevitably someone who is deemed indispensable or considers themselves part of it is no longer there. It's always dangerous when you have someone who's indispensable, by the way. Because you can't necessarily replace them. So if you have a major corporate event that you then get through, whether it's a big fundraise, a flotation, a launch, that's the moment where you sort of take stock of where you are. I would also at that point go out to some recruiters, give them a job description for each of the key members of the founding team so that you've got a backup plan should you need to try and find someone to join you to replace
That
someone who leaves.
that's a very interesting de-risking strategy. Like kind of having contingency plans just in when it happens or when in case it happens. Like put it in the vault.
It also means that at various different iterative points in your business's journey, in your own journey, you have to identify what it is you actually do. You give yourself a job description, which is kind of helpful too. We all hear the word pivoting and all that sort of stuff. The only successful pivots, the only pivots we really hear about are the ones that end up being successful. Um, so pivoting sounds cool. It sounds like a great thing to do. All these great companies began as a refrigerator company and then became the world's biggest mobile phone company. What a great pivot that was. But they're unusual, and that's why they are spectacularly successful and notable. If you look to pivot for the sake of wanting to pivot and being part of the zeitgeist, the reality is investors in particular, stakeholders possibly, will think, well, you just failed and you're starting something else. So be very, very clear about if it is a change of the business and how you've ended up determining that that's something you should do. A critical thing I'd say, number 8 for me, is outsourcing. It can be very effective and efficient to outsource some of your headcount, some of your workload. It's very expensive, but on a day rate, on a weekly rate, on a monthly rate, it can be effective and efficient and very cost effective because you're not bearing the risk of, let's say, benefits, 401k, pension, healthcare, gym membership, office space potentially, annual leave, maternity cover, paternity cover, illness cover. You're just getting someone for the hours that they work for you. And you can turn the tap on and off at 24 hours, 7 days, 30 days notice, whatever it might be. It avoids you giving away equity to people that otherwise might seek it. It avoids you using relationships that you might want to keep for the future. But the challenge with it is, if your build phase or the phase that you're using outside consultants or contractors for is longer than your cash flow was planning for, it's incredibly expensive, and you can overburn and run out of cash very, very quickly through outsourcing. So if you outsource and it then needs to have a period of transition to your own internal staffing, it might be that you don't need it. It might be build and then it's operated with a much lower headcount. But if it's build and operate and you are then going to be building with a headcount, you've got to get that headcount in place at the right time in your cash burn rate. Otherwise, you run out of cash because all of your projections based on headcount were for employees, but you're still burning at contractor rates. And it's something I'd really take a good look at.
This is interesting because that's exactly like the business that we're in, and we're often saying, like, we often have clients or potential leads that say, look, we don't want to outsource because it's too expensive. And then, you look over, okay, what do you need? Okay, you need a dev team, you need this, that. Okay, yes, with your rates just for your salary, it's probably less expensive, but with everything that you currently have, and as you said, equity, maternity leave, sick leave, 13th month, whatever the country is and what the rules are, it now gets really expensive very early on. That's generally where we always say, look, like we hear you, we agree with you, but outsource your POC, your MVP, your version 1, and ensure that you have a transition period in order to have your staff trained up, have a good knowledge transfer, so that when it hits right, and then everybody is happy. And that, I say it from the tech side, but Charlie, that goes the same for marketing, obviously.
No, the point I wanted to make for that was speed. You can turn firstly, the contractor has references or case studies, so they've got a reputation they want to defend, as opposed to an employee can bounce from job to job. The average tenure of an employee is 13 to 18 months this decade, as opposed to, I think it was 2 decades ago. So you're not really seeing longevity in staff, and you have to hire them, you have to background check them, you have to do the rest of that kind of stuff. Whereas you've kind of already got that in a business agreement.
Yeah,
so if you want to move quick, make sure you're working with some decent people. and just get off the ground, get running. Yeah, outsource.
That's it. And but we all then think that the contractors that we outsource to are going to really, really want to work for us and come in house at some point in the future. And if we over rely on that, the truth is they generally don't, because someone who's chosen to be a contractor has a contractor lifestyle, which is very, very unique. And the idea of them being tied down to work for one employer in one sector, in one strategic business, is something that they most likely don't want to do, or they'll do for a while and they'll want to revert back to being a contractor. So there's that concern too. And I suppose the other final point, and this is one of my failings, and I identified this talking with Charlie in advance of this call. Choose your strategic approach. Have a theme that you follow. Whether it's a favorite business mentor, a favorite book, a favorite style of management, of development of a business, so that other people can recognize where you might be in terms of your thinking. I don't and haven't ever done that. And I know that that's a bit of a gap in my own development if I run a business, because other people can't put their finger on the way that I'm necessarily planning my strategic goals and my delivery and my outcome and so on, because I'm not following a particular approach. So that's a big learner for me. And the final point would be, if you're in a relationship, you're married, you've got a partner, you have family, you've got dependents, but particularly if you're in a relationship, be honest and open about what you're doing. Try not to hide and segment work life too much. It's the way we often should exist in many phases of our professional life, being able to separate work and personal life. But when you're building a business, when you're a founder and you're thinking and living and breathing your business, be open and honest with your loved ones or loved one, because like it or not, they're tied to you while you're in this journey yourself. And if you keep secrets, they always bite you on the backside. And you're going to be looking for support at some point at various times from your emotional crutch or from a relationship, and they need to know what it is that you're going through. So share the good times, and then they might be there with you for the tough times, but they need to know what's going on in your mind.
Like work-life balance exists, but generally, like your work life always spoils over to your private life, and vice versa, right? Like I think
it does.
Definitely. And again, like, in the emerging tech space that we're sitting in, I think it's very often the case. And I don't necessarily think it is a bad thing, as you said, as long as you keep the lines and communication, people around you very open and transparent, so they know what is going on. So they also can create that understanding. Or have that understanding what you're going through, right? Like, even if you don't need their support, they're still like, oh yeah, okay, but there is, we know he has a big launch coming up, right? Like, for instance, okay, that's great. Like, I'm rooting for him. He doesn't need my support right now, but at least I know why he's less available.